Hi, I'm Arthur, and this is part 11 in a 20-part series I am doing covering the all-stars of the Space Marine chapters, the successors, who have the most interesting lore or most rabid fan base, and in this case, it is both. Because today, fellas, we are going to be talking about this idea of bad ideas that somehow turn into potential good ideas. In 40k, that is pretty uncommon. Usually, someone does the exact opposite, where they attempt to save their planet by any means necessary, good idea, and end up making a pact with a demon that ends up destroying their planet for a different reason. Bad ending. Though I feel that example is a bit more of a bad idea that ended badly, but had good intentions, but you get what I mean. The idea kind of stands there. People in 40k usually have ideas that are not only terrible, but usually end with the deaths of billions, if not trillions. I remind you, the Tyranid expert in this setting somehow thought it was a good idea to put Tyranids in a forever war with a massive wah of orcs, hoping they would exterminate each other just to see what would happen, but it ended with the Tyranids hyper-adapting into the perfect combat forms, and the orcs becoming so engorged on the forever war that they became super orcs. I'd say that's about like a 9 out of 10 on the bad idea scale, but you know what's worse? Something so stupid that even people who like demons don't do it? Yeah, intentionally getting yourself possessed. That is one of those things that I don't really need to elaborate on, but I will. Just, not now. Being possessed by a demon in the best case scenario usually means death for you and everybody in the room, but in the worst case scenario, where your willpower and body are strong enough to not be immediately killed, but not strong enough to resist the demon that is inhabiting your body, you will then be possessed and have your body be reshaped to fit the needs of the thing possessing you, which means that not only are you no longer in control of yourself, a demon is now able to walk on the mortal plane, mostly unharmed, and in fact tear shit up, usually leading to the spread of cults, spread of demonic corruption, the demise of thousands at best. But yeah, it kind of gets worse than that. But demon possession, pretty bad. So what if I told you there is a chapter of Space Marines out there that, as a rite of passage to even get into the chapter, you need to be possessed by a demon, banish it mostly through the use of your own will, and somehow still survive. Yeah, you know where this is going. Today we talk about the kings of bad ideas executed perfectly, the Exorcists, a chapter I have had requested for a very long time, and I'm glad to finally be able to cover them. But you know what isn't ever a bad idea? Getting a gosh darn case from our dang sponsor. Let me throw a mental image your way. It's late. 5 a.m. You wake up, you need to piss something fierce. You don't turn the lights on because the burning sensation of a flashbang that early in the morning is probably the most unpleasant thought you could have ever had. Navigating through your dark room, you hear a crunch underfoot and swiftly feel the pain as if you had stepped on a literal knife. But no, that was the poor goblin spearman you had just finished painting and had laid out on the floor without protection. This was me years ago, painting and building miniatures, lining them up in small boxes on the floor in between play, but thanks to the MagCase 2.0 XL, I have the ability to sort out all of my miniatures and store them in a nice display cabinet so that I never have to crush poor Ricky the Goblin ever again. Tabletop Stronghold has been a sponsor of this channel for a little while now, and there is a reason. I literally use their cases every day for sorting, for transport, for movement, and stacking books on top of in some cases because it's just a very convenient flat surface to have things on. They have cases in numerous different sizes, ranging from the extra large, which I use to keep my little tootsies safe from wayward spears, all the way down to the MagCase Mini, which is perfect for transporting to skirmish games. With massive deals and sales going on all the time, now is the perfect time to get yourself a case. And trust me, you don't want to find out how Bloodletters ended up getting their name. If you use code BONES25 at checkout on something that doesn't have a better discount, you get 25% off the purchase of anything on the site. Anywho, click the link in the description or pinned comment and grab your case today. And if you nab one, spam the hell out of me in my Discord server to show me how you use it. I'd love to see. Thanks to Tabletop Stronghold for sponsoring this video. And let's get back to talking about less crunchy ways of getting rid of demons. So, to understand what the Exorcists are, we kind of have to discuss what possession truly entails here, because it's not something I hear people often discussed. It's often said that a demon cannot occupy material space for long. It's kind of like taking a fish out of water and expecting it to survive on its own. Demons can survive out of the warp, but with no warp source, they often can't stick around for a while, as they are creatures that don't really have much of a physical body. They are made up of pure energy, and thus don't really have a physical form, though accounts differ from person to person in terms of authors. When someone who has no warp presence, namely a Sister of Silence, looks at a demon, they actually see them for what they truly are, usually described as a rolling ball of black ooze and sludge that's taking the vague shape of what other people see them as, with viscera in them just haphazardly strewn about. The image of demons we see is actually the psychic image that they project into our conscious mind. Seeing is believing in this setting, so because we see them as that, they essentially are that to us. For a demon to occupy real space, they need to have a source of warp energy permanently linking them to the planes of chaos, or a physical body that they can inhabit. If the body is strong enough, they can stay in there for a while, though it also depends on the physical properties of a demon. A greater demon possessing a normal human usually means they explode. But in the case of Space Marines, they can be possessed, and that's when things get weird. Demons are spiritual creatures made of energy, and in order to possess someone, they need to have energy of a similar nature they can replace. A human soul is often devoured, pushed down, or just whole on destroyed so the demon can take its place in the owner's body. Think of it like a human body is a glass, and the water that currently fills it is the water of your spirit. That's the spirit that fills it. I don't know, it could be a better analogy, but a demon basically is a red liquid that is poured into you, slowly causing you to overflow and eventually remove all the water that was in there bit by bit and replacing it with the red liquid that was in there. Think of it water to wine or wine to water. Once it's inside and you are no longer in control, it will use its abilities as a creature of the warp to modify your body, using warp energies and biomancy to make talons and make your body more to its liking, with bone spurs, scales, or whatever demon type that prefers it. I should note they have to do it slowly, because if they do it too much too quickly, they can actually kill the body, which means they are sent back. And this is what led to the creation of Space Marine Possessed being so dangerous, because they don't need to be as careful when possessing a Space Marine, as their bodies are just particularly hardy. Now, this is where we move on to the Exorcists and their odd history. Their origins are murky, coming from the 13th founding and coming from the lineage of Dorn. I know it's a bit of a speculative thing that a lot of people say that they truly aren't from Rogel Dorn or Imperial Fists, but as the most recent novel to come out, Oaths of Damnation, there was a Tzeentch demon in there that, using their weird prognostication psychic bullshit magic, were able to basically say that they were from Dorn. So I don't know, I believe them. Come on, can't you trust a Lord of Change? Look at this bird. Pretty chill if you ask me. But regardless, they are a chapter steeped in a lot of mystery and occultism, as even early on they were known for being particularly taciturn, as well as being shrouded in occult mysticism, even before the whole demon shit. One of my favorite things about them is that in their old Bad Ab War art from like the early editions, they kind of had the Raptors treatment, where they were just bright yellow and blue for their first paint scheme. I unironically love the scheme, but I do love the one they went with in the future more. But back then, they were still known for being pretty hard to corrupt anyway, with it being noted in lore that demons have a weirdly hard time finding any weaknesses in their soul to exploit. This would lead to a rather interesting occurrence during the Battle of Totem 4, where the Exorcists had a bit of a chance encounter with two groups, one being a greater demon cohort led by Lord of Change Who Gives a Fuck, and a group of Inquisitors known as the Plutonians. See, the gifts of the Exorcists were very hard to get past. Not being able to be corrupted or convinced of anything, the Lords of Trickery were getting pretty annoyed displayed by the bolt shells and the color yellow. So, the Lord of Change, whose name literally does not matter, he is just a tool for the backstory that gave you the Exorcists you know and love, concocted a scheme most foul, where he would possess their at-the-time chapter master, a man by the name of Enoch Trismegistus, which led to one of the funniest whoopsies in demonic history. So, remember when I said that 40K is all about good ideas that end badly? Yeah, this is one of them, but not for us. It was for the demon. But, let's get into what happened to that poor soul. So, weirdly enough, Enoch, Mr. Trismegistus, didn't actually explode, but in a way that some would consider suspicious, was able to contain the demon and not give up control to his body. Now, did he end up suffering a lot? Yes, quite a lot, actually, because demons are a thing of the warp, so that was essentially a human being being mixed with pure warp energy. Remember that analogy I gave before, where a demon in real space is like a fish out of water? They can survive in real space without any warp source, but not for too long. Yeah, now let's expand on that analogy. A human in the warp is like taking that same fish and then chucking that fucker into the heart of an active volcano. They won't survive. Period. But for some reason, this dude was literally built different, and thus was able to survive long enough to banish the demon from his body, which is pretty rare in and of itself. But alongside that, with an echo of the mind of the demon still inside of him, he was able to glean some information about the battle and was able to win the war pretty easily. This led to the Plutonians being a bit particularly unnerved, so they brought him in to do some rigorous purity testing in order for them to see if he was actually who he says he was and was not actually possessed by the god of trickery. You know, kind of an important thing to do, and it makes a lot of sense. But apparently he passed all the tests with flying colors, which led to them getting one hell of a devious grin across their faces all collectively at the same time. It was actually quite eerie now that I think about it. See, the Plutonians are a radical group in the Inquisition and had a theory that small amounts of demonic possession or harnessing demon powers could lead to good results in the battlefield as well as in the fight against chaos, which, okay, see what happened to the Relictors to understand why that shit is a mixed bag at best. They proposed this idea to the Exorcist, which they completely disagreed with, thinking it was idiotic. But they did have their own kind of counter-proposal. Ever since the possession of Enoch, he had seemed a bit different, hollowed out, like he was missing pieces of himself, but alongside that, demonic corruption didn't just have little effect on him, it had absolutely no effect on him, if any at all, really. So this is when the practice began possessing their inductees with demons that the Inquisition had captured, and through sheer will alone, along with some esoteric, partially psychic rituals, they have to banish the demon out of their bodies after 12 hours. And if they fail, well, for one, they don't become battle brothers, but then there's usually two fates here. For one, they get shot. Death is preferable to a corrupted monster running around, but then there's option 2. See, capturing demons? That's pretty hard, but the bodies of the Exorcists seemed especially capable of basically being a living prison for them. So what happened was this new, category of brother was added to their roster, the Broken Ones. Individuals who had one or more demons stored in them, which in essence does two things. One, it allowed them to access the demons on demand in order to help with their initiation rites. And two, in a weird way, with the demons stored in these handy meat containers, they were kind of a semi-permanent way to reduce the powers of chaos. I mean, it is kind of weird to say that, but say you survive the initiation, what happens then? Well, your soul ends up essentially being scarred. A lot of people say that you lose most of it, but what does that even mean? You can lose most of your liver and have it grow back. Can you grow back a soul? 40K does this thing from time to time where they throw out the idea of like, oh, no, you don't understand. They actually don't have a soul. They lost their soul. No, they don't have any emotions, which makes no sense because if they did have no emotions, they wouldn't do anything. They just stand there catatonically because, you know, a thing that's tied with emotions is a desire, want. You want to do things. So if you don't want to do things, you just kind of stand there and do nothing all day. The best way I can see it is when the space marine in question and the demon are intertwined, their spirits are like a tree that grew through barbed wire. To remove one is going to damage the other. Not kill it, but damage it severely unless unless it's removed carefully. And usually the tree is able to grow back, twisted with a bit of a scar on it that makes it look a bit different and a bit warped, but still able to grow back. Thus the idea of echoes. The echoes of damnation is basically the term they use to describe the longer-lasting semi-demonic taint that sticks to them after they've been exorcised. A good example of this is, say you were possessed by a cornate fleshhound during your initiation. Well, your echoes could be you now have the ability to smell psychers on the air or psychic corruption. Or say you were possessed by a bloodletter. Your echoes could be that you get sudden rages in the middle of battle, and also you grow horns out of the top of your head. They can be physical, they can be psychological, they can be almost an occult mystical ability. These echoes do tend to get worse when untreated. That is where the chapter's culture comes in, and the idea of the minor subcults of the Exorcists known as orisons. See, with the rise of their ability to combat demons and chaos corruption, they were able to research and look into forbidden knowledge in a way that most other factions wouldn't really be able to, and still be sane. Books written by a Tzeentchian sorcerer who went mad and exploded afterwards that would instantly corrupt most humans or even space marines can actually be read by exorcists because their spirits, there's nothing to grab onto. They just don't get corrupted. Exorcists use the power of the rituals to defeat demons that were written by other demons, using the demonic sigils and their understanding of chaos to counteract it. Less so overuse of psychers, and more so, say you have a ritual that was invented to banish corn demons that requires specific carvings and specific ritual chants. It was created by a Slaneshi demon that was an enemy of corn. Normally, someone who would attempt this ritual would fall to Slanesh, as it is a Slaneshi demon rite, but when practiced properly with the right modifications to the chants to beseech the Emperor rather than Slanesh, and say you get the person who had a Slaneshi demon inside of them when they were inducted to conduct the ritual, then the ritual itself can be done relatively safe, all things considered. This is where the orisons actually arose from. Orisons are a kind of secret club groups that are similar to the Dark Angels orders that were kind of during the Horus Heresy, where each one is a minor cult that has a different purpose, and each one has its own ranking system that you kind of had to be a part of. Each one is used to collect and spread the information about certain demon types to help the chapter, as well as the afflicted of the chapter. A good example would be to say you were a part of this order, let's say the Order of the Blood and the Knife or something. You can join only if you are a Reaver or another melee combatant that has been possessed by Khorne in order to be a part of the chapter during your induction. The purpose of this orison is to answer questions you as a person might have about the afflictions and echoes you would see, because everybody there has dealt with something similar at some point, as well as conduct purity rites in order to silence the echoes of your demon Never-Brother, which, by the way, they referred to the demons that had possessed them during their induction as a Never-Brother, which I think is cool. So even if you banish a demon, you will get some weird afflictions. Even with them gone and you get these little minor abilities, you will sometimes hear their voice and feel their presence if you do not treat the echoes properly. Demons exist in sort of this perpetual state where they exist now, in the past, and in the future all at the same time. They're kind of a universal constant. So if you have a trace of them in you, even if they are banished, sealed away, or what have you, you somehow can still communicate with them. Now, it's not 100% confirmed if the echo is actually them communicating with you, or it's just a small portion of their abilities communicating with you. I don't know. One account of this kind of thing happening is an Eliminator Sergeant whose Never-Brother was a Slaneshi demon. His main echo was an obsession with the concept of perfection in terms of being the best sniper in his team. But sometimes when he had not undergone the rite of purity for quite a long time, or he had engaged with too much raw chaos energy, he would see the chaos demon itself appear behind him, always out of sight and referring to him as their lover, trying to seduce them from the Imperium to chaos, usually to be banished for their sinful tongue. I've mentioned the purity rites a few times now, but what exactly are there? The easiest way to put it is that they're all different to some degree, but all stem from the occult research that each member of the orisons that are in the chapter have to conduct. So say your echoes are like the sniper that I mentioned. Your purity rites could be a sensory deprivation chamber followed by ritual scarification of your body with the markings of the Emperor's Tarot to make it so that the only sensations you feel in terms of pain or pleasure link back with devotion to the Emperor, not the demon that is inside it. Some ritual mutilations occur to some individuals, such as sawing off bones, spurs, yanking out sharpened teeth, skinning off sections of scaled skin, disinfecting pustules with fire. The echoes will always return, but these rites and the rituals associated with them are used to actually lessen the effects of them or even quiet them for periods. Sometimes they can be gone for a year, maybe a couple weeks. Sometimes people let certain afflictions grow because they don't really hinder their combat ability, and some you can't really deal with. There are individuals who can taste when other people are lying, and there's no real way to get rid of that. So I think that that's very interesting that they had this culture of pruning these issues out of other members so that they can be more effective in combat. So now that we've kind of talked about the culture, let's talk about the chapter distribution as well as their reputation with other Marines. As weirdly enough, if you couldn't tell, they aren't really Codex compliant. There are a lot of records that state they are Codex compliant, but I feel like they are Codex compliant in the same way that I am 6 feet tall, meaning they aren't. Like, they followed some of the rules of the Codex, I guess just accidentally, but in actuality, they really don't do much with it outside of how they structure their ranks for their basic companies. You know, captain, 2 lieutenants, the first companies, the veterans, etc., etc. But the thing is, they deviate in almost every other place. Like, with the amount of companies, the subgroups they have, and for one, they actually have 12 companies. As you could probably tell, the recruitment rate for these Marines is pretty low in terms of success. And considering even further they fight mostly demons, yeah, their death rate is also pretty fucking high. So they originally had 3 companies dedicated to Scout Marines. The 10th, 11th, and 12th companies were all scouts and training for new potential brothers, supposedly throwing them directly into the path of corruption and demons for the sake of making them stronger before they get possessed and are inducted into proper brotherhood, I guess. Basically just making sure they are truly incorruptible. Which, I don't know if you know much about scouts, but they don't exactly do well against demons, but whatever. Thus, the extra companies, but with the implementation of the Primaris gene seed organs and the additions of those new upgrades, there was kind of a new addition to these. The 10th company was turned from a scout and training company to a fully Primaris Vanguard company. You know, Reavers, Infiltrators, all that nonsense. The rest of the companies are basically the same as dictated in the Codex, but there is some differentiation. The Enochian Guard, named after Enoch Trismegistus, is essentially the first company of their chapter. Now, normally, how it works is that if you are a veteran and display excellent service, you're usually inducted into the first company, but the Enochian Guard are kind of different, and you have to accomplish a bit more than that. You have to be a veteran, yeah, but in order to truly be a member of the first company, you have to accomplish something a bit more difficult than usual. You have to actually defeat and kill a demon in one-on-one combat. Now, you might think that that is, okay, well, I do that all the time on the tabletop, but in lore, a single bloodletter, that's not easy to fight. Ever. I'm sorry, you're not that guy. You are just not that guy. It is kind of impressive that they could even accomplish that in one-on-one combat, but even after that, members of the Enochian Guard have to vouch for you that you are truly good and respectable as a dude for the chapter, which I guess makes sense if you think about it, considering who they are, but whatever. Now we have to talk about one of the weirder but more important subgroups, but before we do that, we gotta talk about the Purgatum. A bit of a dramatic name, but you remember how I mentioned before if you fail induction, which with there being 2 scout companies more than normal, you'd assume is actually rather frequent, you'd normally get a lot of broken ones. You know, the Space Marines whose bodies are filled with demons trapped there so that they can be used in these rituals or just to seal away demons forever. Well, you gotta have a place to put them, right? And I feel like keeping them on your main planet is a bit of a morale debuff, if I do say so myself. Thus, a massive ship known as the Purgatum was created. It was commissioned specifically to be held in stasis, and if you can't hold them in stasis, hold them under psychic wards filled with rituals, and if no other option exists Exorcists. Find some kind of esoteric demon prison for the broken ones who can't be contained. Purgatum is probably the most dangerous spaceship in the universe, if I had to hazard a guess, as it has probably hundreds of Marines who are possessed with likely dozens of demons all at once. If something were to go wrong, this ship would basically be a planet-scale demon nuke. I mean, if they really wanted to, they could just launch this at any world, demon-occupied or not, and just destroy it, but then, oh man, all hell breaks loose. I do suppose they have the option just to fly it directly into the sun, but then, you know, the demons get loose and are just sent back to the warp, whatever. On the Purgatum, there is probably an even more elite guard version of the Enochian Guard, which is the Daemonium Palitone. God, I hate Latin. Basically, their job is to watch over the Purgatum and make sure nothing bad happens, which is a pretty fucking important job, as if something happens, the entire ship could tear an entire system apart. The fun fact about these weirdos is that they don't wear the traditional red that the Exorcists are known for. They actually wear pitch black power armor, which microscopically has the Book of Exorcisms from the Inquisition laser engraved into it. Like, every single page is just microscopically a single letter put there. It's really cool. I really like the idea that it just looks like there's weird bumps all over, but no, it's just an engraving of this massive book about how to exorcise demons. Their helmets are seen as completely featureless, though, to show that they have kind of a grim task and that they are not really a part of the chapter normally. And another thing that I find interesting is that they all are equipped with jumps, and I feel like that is just to get to places quickly to deal with anything that arises. I think it's just such a fun detail, which is a good way to describe the Exorcists. Having accepted the tech to build Primaris Marines with open arms, their contingent of Grey Shields being dead, they kind of had to reconstruct the chapter entirely around the Primaris make, finding that the naturally resistant genetics of the Primaris mixes well with their weirdly modified gene seed. They work to find a way to kill demons at every angle, hiding from the Inquisition as they slowly become more and more corrupted in body, but not in spirit or in mind. Hiding on the battlefield because if any inquisitorial staff found them, they would immediately be jettisoned violently into the sun as quickly as humanly possible. They hide their bodies inside of the thickest armor they can have, very rarely taking off their helmets in order to show themselves in a public battlefield. And in a lot of cases, when they show up on a battlefield, they often get confused for the word bearers just because they look pretty weirdly similar. They are literally following the playbook of what not to do in 40K. And I mean, to be fair, the majority of the playbook is about like 5 sentences long, and each of them are structured the same way, and it's usually starting with do not fuck with blank because, and yeah. But the number one thing you do not fuck with is demons. But these guys do, letting demons inside them, and they somehow eke out a relatively successful career of killing the living shit out of every chaotic thing they find. They are a useful tool, and I gotta say, this has been a bit of a long time coming. Just want to get a bit sappy about this here for a minute, but in the Discord community that I have, which by the way, there's a link to the Discord server in every one of my videos, there is an individual. And if you know, you know, but this man has been in the community since probably the beginning. He's just always been there from what I remember, and he is quite literally the biggest fan of the Exorcists on the planet. And he, for a while, had been asking me to make this video, but I wanted to make sure that I was 100% prepared for it. He is a boon of positivity and genuinely one of the best members of the community, so I dedicate this video to you. You know who you are. I'm not gonna point him out because that'd be kind of rude, but yeah, you finally get your Exorcist video. Now, will I make another one in the future? Goddamn, maybe? I do like covering new material as it happens, so who knows? Maybe I can update it at some point, but for now, this is basically all you really need to know to understand the Exorcists. They fight demons in a way on par with the Grey Knights, but on the exact opposite end of the spectrum in terms of what they do. They should collab with the Relictors at some point because I feel like they would work very well together, but either way, what do you all think about the Exorcists? Cool? Terribly? Bad? Funny? I don't know. Let me know in the comments. I wish to know. I like them a lot, and they are always a faction I kind of genuinely consider to play whenever I think about Space Marines and looking at the pile of stuff that I should probably paint at some point. But whatever. Special thanks to my channel members. With your help, I am able to get these videos done at a relatively rapid pace, get all of my work done as quick as possible, and send that off to my editors. Thank you to them specifically. And maybe even once in a while, just get a break here and there. But once again, thank you all for watching. Until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful night.